Okay, everybody, another great session from the team there, and welcome to our final session for today, which is our fireside chat titled Breaking Barriers, Theme Parks for All. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to the team, Carl, Myron, and Stephen. I'll give a brief introduction. Carl has more than 20 years experience in the leisure industry, working in public, private, and non-profit throughout the US and the Middle East. His experience encompasses a diverse array of leisure facilities, which include theme parks, water parks, FECs, surf parks, and resorts. His work includes working on park strategy, development, operations, events, and a focus on pre-opening. That's a big task, Carl.
It is.
There's a lot going on.
Do.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And Myron, sat in the middle, board chairman of the International Board of Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards for over 10 years, oversees global operation and splits his time between the US and Dubai, servicing the entire GCC region. His innovative ideas have led the company to work with professionals across healthcare, education, entertainment, travel, corporate sectors in 109 countries. That must be a full passport.
It is. Lots of freaking player miles.
And they're helping improve accessibility and guest satisfaction for autistic individuals and guests with other disabilities. 20 years of starting, building, and running highly successful companies. Welcome, Myron.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Stephen is an award-winning accessibility consultant and director of Direct Access Group, which has accessibility consultants in the US, the UK, and the GCC. Stephen was awarded an MBE by the late Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II for his work done towards creating a more inclusive world. Congratulations, Stephen. He was recently Director of Accessibility at Expo 2020 Dubai, led the Expo City's efforts to sustain and host an inclusive COP28 event, and is now project lead for Direct Access's accessibility project in Saudi with S-7. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So let me dive straight in, and what an important topic, and how interesting to be able to talk about this and bring it to such a new market in Saudi. And we've heard so far throughout the expo and throughout the sessions about developing and working with partnerships and new ventures, but this is really getting into the details here, and we think about Parks for All. Let's start with an opener. Can you describe, and I pitch it to the three of you, can you describe the current state of accessibility in parks and attractions? What are some of the common barriers that you face, Saudi or even in this region? What do we see commonly? Let's maybe start, Stephen.
If you don't mind me starting, I would say two things. With the Sustainable Development Goals and Saudi Arabia signing up, having sustainability on the remit, we are realizing now that sustainability is actually accessibility. If you look at it, you've got education, social, living, sport, it's all accessibility. The second thing, current state of the park, we very much focused on the physical environment. I think now we are starting to realize that we need to be more sensory aware. We need to consider the neurodiversity. I'll keep my answer short. Perfect.
Myron.
Very good. So as you mentioned, we work in 109 different countries, so we see the challenges vary by region and by attraction.
Glad it's you and not me.
Now, it's test. Okay, so we see they vary by region, by attraction. This is really obvious in what we call the hidden disabilities. So it's pretty easy to access a guest who comes in a wheelchair, but somebody comes in with autism or a hearing deficiency or low vision, it's not as easy to spot those individuals. And so I think overall we have a long way to go. Some parks are way ahead of others, but overall we have a long way to go. Some of those barriers, I think the first one is in employee knowledge. So you can have the most accessible roller coaster in the world, but if the employee doesn't know how to identify and explain that to the guest and explain those options, then it does you no good to have that roller coaster. I think another barrier is stigma. So a lot of people think that if you have a disability, you're not going to go to a theme park or an amusement park, and that's not true at all. So again, 1 in 4 people, it's actually 26% of people globally are diagnosed with a disability. So it's 26% of the population. That's a huge segment. There's not very many subsegments of the population that are 26%. So it's definitely a large group that you should consider and look at. So.
Yeah. So coming from the U.S. and being in the Middle East now almost 10 years, there's quite a big difference. I think here in the region we do kind of have an advantage having younger parks, learning from parks in the UK or US that were built before inclusion was really taken into consideration. And so I think in some ways, particularly in this region, we're kind of ahead of the ball game in some respects, and then also still catching up in other areas. Accessibility, getting into the parks and access, I think we do a very, very good job of that. But again, where we're lacking is information and education, getting that information out to the guests, and then educating our staff and getting everybody up to speed on this whole thing.
What about innovation? What's happening? What are we doing differently? What's new? What should the audience? What are takeaways when we talk about design principles? What's innovative? What's new in this industry? And what are we doing to make parks more accessible?
So we see a lot of things on the design side, from a design of a roller coaster to the different equipment. But I really think innovation in technology is going to have the biggest impact. So I'll give you an example. We have an app called the Accessibility app. It's used in the US. We have about 375,000 people that use it a day. But literally, we work with all the Six Flags parks in North America. We work with all the SeaWorld, Universal Studios. But if you're a guest in North America and you need any type of accommodation, you have to go to our app first. You have to fill out the survey. We take that data, we immediately send it to the gate at Six Flags or whatever park we're working with. So you're welcomed at the gate. They know whether you need a wheelchair or you have sensory needs or whatever it happens to be. Guests want to know before they go. And this really improves guest experience, because now when you walk to that park with a family of 4 or 5, you're not all 5 waiting in queue line to get your fast pass if you're at Disney or if you're any of these other options. Because part of our app, we give you that card before you go. It also cuts down on fraud. So in the US, it's a big deal with fraud. People will say they have autism just to get a fast pass. It's a massive financial advantage, plus you get to the front of the line. But we have independent reps on our healthcare side, because healthcare is our biggest division. But we verify all those needs before they even get to the park, and everything is set in place. So again, I think it's just an example of the way technology is making the guest experience better and making parks more accessible. Without this piece in line, one of the things we found at Disney was the fast pass line was longer than the general admission. So that's taking the option away from somebody who really needs that, just by people who are trying to cheat the system. But that's completely changed now. So.
Okay. Carl, what about from an operator's perspective? How does, you and especially you've just opened a brand new park, you had a blank piece of paper, you can make every accommodation in the world, and it comes out perfectly in design, I'm sure.
Right. Of course. I think what we're looking at now is, as far as design principles, is historically when you're designing a park, you're looking at, I need to a ride, and attraction, and immersive experience for different age groups. I need something for the very young children, I need something for the adults, something thrilling, something not so much. Now we're also looking at what attractions, what rides, what immersive experiences can we accommodate for everybody, not just an age group, right? Now we're looking at all abilities. And for us, that's from our touch pools that we have, to our specialized seating at some of our shows and our amphitheaters. So taking those aspects into the design phase just as much as you would with what you would previously do with age restrictions.
One thing I wanted to ask the panel, you guys must have some great stories and some great insights. So can you share a story or an experience where improved accessibility measures significantly enhanced guest experience, where it was tangible, we see those results? Stephen?
I will certainly answer this question. I would just like to go back on the previous one, which was innovation. I would say these guys have covered the technology side, but I think also we need to have innovative thinking which is we need to approach accessibility through 4 pillars, which is consider the social environment, the digital environment, the physical environment, and the digital environment. And it is only when you cover all 4 can we create a really inclusive theme park. To answer your question about personal experience, my son is autistic. I am also deaf, cochlear implant user. We just came back from Walt Disney World in Florida, very expensive, but their app was incredible because it described each of the rides and told me what access features were available to me, which ones had caption, which didn't have caption, which one had loud noise, lighten, touch, smell, terrain, which really helped me and my family make informed choices of where to go. So accessibility is not just about the physical environment and making sure you can get onto a ride or having a quiet room, but it is also about giving people the power of knowledge in their hands, which then give them the confidence to use to facilitate and maneuver around a theme park. Thank you.
Myron, what have you seen? What stories have you guys been part of?
Sure, and we have lots of them, but one of the things we're big on is tracking the ROI, because with any initiative that you introduce, it has to pay for itself at least. So a quick story about Sesame Place. I talked about, we work with all the SeaWorld parks globally, but when we launched Sesame Place 5 years ago, first of all, after we did the training and certification of the whole staff, we went in and created sensory guides. The whole park was outfitted. But on opening day, they had 400 families that showed up on the Saturday that they opened it. And then we tracked ROI for the next 5 years. We immediately saw a trend on their out-of-market guest. Their out-of-market guest increased by almost 2.5 times after we launched it. And then their customer satisfaction scores went up by 12%. And these could all be tracked back to, again, most of their complaints and things before were based on expectations from people who didn't have the accommodations that they need. So that's just a quick story. We've got similar stories all over the world. Yeah.
So from our side, we have 2 large amphitheaters at our park, 2,000 seat stadiums. One of the things we wanted to incorporate obviously was making sure we had wheelchair access ease into the park, and that was not something in the original design. We put a few spaces in, park opened, and shortly after opening, we found out that the demand outstripped our supply, and so we've had to go back and retinker with our layouts and increase the number of spaces we have to accommodate the guests in the park. So we've been able to accommodate 18 wheelchair bays and 25 seats for anybody else who might need assistance inside each of our stadiums, so they don't have to traverse the stairs. And yeah.
So we talk a lot about accommodating guests with disabilities and ensuring that we can accommodate people. But how do we go beyond that? How do we celebrate them?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we're really big on is inclusion. And inclusion doesn't mean that you point somebody out for having a disability. So that's one thing I think, when we talk with all of our guests, if you're going to have an autism night or you're going to celebrate people of determination, you don't want to do that once a year. You don't want to do it once a week. It's got to become part of your culture. And that's really one thing, as an industry, we're beyond the 1 day a year celebration for people with disabilities. It really becomes a part of the ingrained culture as far as employees, as far as guest satisfaction, all the way through. People with disabilities don't want to wear a lanyard or a sign around their neck that say, I have a challenge. They want to be, everything needs to be inclusive. It needs to be part of the normal experience. So that's one of the things we do with our training and our audits is we really push that guests with accessibility needs, they come 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's got to be part of the culture. So.
Perfect. Stephen?
You've actually said some of the things I wanted to say there, but 100% diversity in employment. I want to see more disabled people, or people with disabilities, or people of determination, depending on where you are, employed within theme park. That's number one. The second, going back on that, 1 in 10 people have some form of hearing loss. I go to a theme park, not 1 in 10 people have a hearing impairment. So I'm already measuring it by that. The second thing, I want to see more marketing in theme parks on websites that actually feature disabled people. And I don't mean a wheelchair user smiling in front of a roller coaster. I mean as part of a crowd. And next thing is as well, more inclusive social media. I think theme park leisure need to have sign language video because perception is reality, perception is everything. And the more inclusive you portray yourself, the more revenue you're going to get. So there's a strong business case. And we must remember that disabled people don't come in silos, they don't come on their own. They come with families, friends, partners, children. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
It's been a topic, but training and education again. Training for our staff, so that they have the correct resources they need, destigmatizing some beliefs of what they may interpret somebody with a disability or needs extra assistance. And education for our guests, getting the resources out online, information to them to know what accommodations we have, what rides, attractions, and things that they can participate in. So that way they don't have that barrier or feel that they can't participate. For us, we have a program, so when the guests come to the park, they bring, if you're from the UAE, we have a POD, person of determination card. You can bring that to the desk and that gets you a discounted entry. It also provides you with a wealth of information and you go into our system. Those of you who aren't familiar with SeaWorld, it's part of Yas Island and we have 4 parks on the island. And so that goes into our database around the island. That way you're registered. So whenever you come to any of our parks, we already have your information and we can directly guide you to whatever attractions or experiences that might be best fit for you. And so yeah.
That's interesting. We touched on this next question a little bit, but let's delve a bit deeper. How is technology helping to ensure these experiences? How's technology helping operators to deliver these experiences? Myron touched on it. Stephen touched on the Walt Disney app. How are we managing technology? How are we making best use of technology for what we're delivering?
I'm more excited about what's about to come than what's existing right now. So we're working with quite a few theme parks here in Saudi. One of the things that excites me the most is the app curated to personal experiences and requirements. So for an instance, if somebody's vision impaired, the theme park app will voice navigate you to where you need to go. If you're a wheelchair user, the app will tell you the shortest route and the most level gradient to get to where you need to be. So I think when we just had the pandemic just gone, people grew closer to their mobile phone devices. So we're relying on them more and more now. I think the most exciting thing are how to make that interactive. And another one is, for an example, Star Wars Land in Disney World. The phone is actually interactive with the park, so autistic children had something to focus on as well. So I think, to answer your question, the most exciting part is utilizing personal devices within the theme park.
Yeah, one thing we always stress when we're working with a park that's pre-opening or in the design stage is there's not a one-size-fits-all. So when you're worried about the thrill in one ride, don't take it away because okay. All right, back to it. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So, I'll just take somebody with autism for an example. Some of them are stimulated by sight, some of them are stimulated by smell, some are stimulated by sound. So don't try to make every ride accessible for everybody. make your park have options for everybody instead. So again, don't worry about taking the thrill away for some, because that's actually stimulating to a lot of people. But just think of the bigger picture, your park is accessible.
Technological innovations definitely through apps, the internet, but also on the rides. It's working with the manufacturers in designing specific train cars or rides that can accommodate people of all walks of life. So that's also, I think, something that's coming down the pipeline as well, and that we're starting to see inside the parks. If you look at play structures and things, soft play, bespoke equipment, they are now implementing games and interactive playgrounds for everybody of all abilities.
And when parks and attractions, and we're talking about designing these experiences and implementing them, how well or how can we incorporate feedback from specially able visitors, from guests with disabilities, to continually adapt and improve facilities? How can we take that feedback on board and make things more accessible for them?
Yeah, feedback is very important. So again, you have to involve the community. So you have to involve the disability community. They have to be part of it. So I'll give you a couple examples. We try to do this all the time, but next Saturday at Aquaventure in Atlantis in Dubai, we have 50 families that are coming to Aquaventure for the day. They're not coming for a media event. They're coming to give us feedback. So we will personally walk through the whole park with them. They'll experience, and they have a variety of different disabilities. All that data is taken, it's given back to the park, so that we can, and then we'll help them make decisions going forward. We did something similar 2 weeks ago. Emirates Airline is one of our partners. So we took 173 people up in a flight for the day. We flew them around Dubai, but again, it's not a media event. It's actually to get feedback from the community, and this is me today. So yeah, the feedback from the community is very important.
I'm glad I'm deaf, because I bet that's all hurting your ears. I can just turn my hearing aid down, so I'm good, I'm happy. Just going back on the feedback thing, I think one of the things, it is incredibly important, but a lot of organizations forget they need to make the feedback mechanism itself accessible. So that does not mean getting people with an iPad as they leave the park, or an online form on a website. You have to ask disabled people, do you want to participate? Yes. If yes, how do you wish to participate? Because the how is so important. People may want to have sign language. People may want to provide feedback via braille, large print, screen reading. So if you want accurate reflection of feedback proportionate to the community, you have to make sure that that mechanism is accessible, and a lot of organizations forget about that part.
Yeah, I think it goes back to our earlier discussion about ride manufacturers and just making sure that we're on the same page with them in the design phase.
Okay. What about international standards? I think a big theme of the Saudi Entertainment Expo, and we're talking about developing in Saudi and a new market developing, and what can we learn globally and what can we learn internationally. So how have international standards influenced, or how can they influence design and operation of parks and attractions, and what can people at the Expo who are designing and building those attractions now, what can they learn?
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, I'll just answer that. I think the biggest mistake we can do is limit ourselves to localized standards. So whenever there's a new big, whenever there's a big project going on, we must undertake a benchmark report, which is to look at all the international standards and then categorize and go for the best of the best. Because accessibility and inclusion, we are learning new lessons every single day. It is not static, it's always evolving.
Yeah, I would say that's one of our missions for the last 20 years, is really to put global standards around accessibility. In the past, it's been a very fragmented industry. There's little pieces of everything, but how that's come together for us is we actually have 35 cities that are under citywide initiatives right now. But I'll tell you about what we're doing in Dubai. So 2 years ago, the Department of Economy and Tourism called us in, and they want to be one of the most accessible cities in the world. So we're currently training and auditing 860 hotels, 60 attractions, the airport, the metro. There will be over 100,000 people trained in Dubai when we're done with the initiative. I can't say exactly who right now, but if you wait on Thursday, we'll announce another very large city here in Saudi Arabia that is announcing that initiative as well. But we see the move towards standardization and accessibility. And again, it represents 26% of our population. It doesn't need to be fragmented. It needs to be, again, part of the culture and part of everyday life. But,
I think historically, when you're looking at international design standards, ADA comes to mind, I think, for a lot of people. And now you've got, Dubai has a universal design code, Abu Dhabi as well, for making sure that we are including all of our guests. I think in our industry, historically, we think of international standards. We're looking at EN, ASTM, we're looking at the ride standards, the safety standards, not necessarily the inclusion of everybody with all abilities. So I think now that's a lot of pressure is coming on, particularly in this region, in the UAE, from the government there, to making sure that we are including everybody. I think that's a really good thing. And a lot of those standards, in many ways, mirror what is being done with the ADA standards in the States. So there's a nice overlap there of familiarity and somewhat universal agreements on accessibility standards.
Okay, perfect. And I do want to just wrap up with the last question, because I want to make sure we leave some time for some questions from the audience. Looking forward, what's the next big goals or challenges for theme parks, visitor attractions in continuing to enhance accessibility? And what do you think they need to do to meet those challenges?
Okay, I think there's lots of things that need improving. There's lots of areas to look at. But one of the best tips I would like to say, and it's a relatively low-hanging fruit, is get the website talking about the facility and features that are at the park. I see the most accessible theme park, even in Dubai, in this region, but then the website doesn't give disabled people the confidence to go, because 80% of disabled people will research a website before they even think about visiting. So if you don't have a website that tells people what the park's like from an accessibility perspective, with photographs, route, accessible shows, you've lost them. So that is the best piece of advice that I would give to the audience going forward.
Yeah, for us, it's the 2 C's, culture and communication. So again, that should be everybody's goal, is really to make sure you're designing your culture of your whole organization around accessibility. And that needs to start, if you're a new park, before the park opens. If you're an existing park, it needs to be a cultural shift, and that should be the way going forward. I think communication, like Steve said, it's all about communication. So again, it's not but just make sure you're.
It doesn't like you.
Yeah, just make sure. It's the last session of the day. They must be dying. Communication. Just make sure you're communicating what you have. You don't necessarily have to change. None of these families are asking for a red roller coaster or a blue water slide. They just want you to communicate what you have so they know before they get there.
I definitely think more inclusivity on the rides. I think that discussion is coming up now in the design phases. Okay, we have these big rides, whether it's a water slide, it's a roller coaster, it's a play structure. How can we incorporate elements into that to accommodate more people from more walks of life? I think that will definitely be a trend that we are seeing, particularly in this region as well as we go forward. I'll give an example. There's a park in Texas, Morgan's Wonder World, if you want to go look that up. And it's a fully inclusive theme park, splash park, water park, where the whole design and concept, the whole build was based around people with disabilities, people that need to accommodation. the whole park. I think that's where we're going to see inspiration and take ideas from as we move forward with new parks.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Let me open the floor up if there's any questions. I think we've got a microphone out there. If anyone's got any questions for such a great panel of experts to be able to come here and share their knowledge and experience, who live this accessibility journey in our parks every single day. Any questions anybody would like to ask? We have one at the back.
I'm curious because you mentioned sign language, and it made me think, kind of for Carl as an operator, but anyone else like in the room, do you invest in sign language training?
Yes. So
there's a question about sign language. Do you, as operators or consultants, do you invest in sign language training, and is that something that's...
So we actually do. Through the Zayed Hire organization in Abu Dhabi, they actually provide sign language training for us free of charge. So we do, it's a 3-day course, can be done online or in person. So that is something actually that we are actively promoting for our frontline colleagues. It's a very good question.
Any more questions from the audience before we wrap up? One on the front row.
Actually, along the same lines, because are there like free international resources that operators can access to use? Are there free international resources that operators can access and basically get training that we can incorporate into our onboarding process, or like any resources come to mind that we can take note of?
Yeah, so I'm sure there's stuff out there. I know, again, going back to the UAE and Abu Dhabi, so we have the Zayed Hire organization, which is the side of the government that looks after anybody, people of determination. And they provide those free trainings, whether it be sign language, whether it be autism awareness, or any other type of ability. So they do provide that to us. I'm sure there's resources online, but I wouldn't know exactly about those.
Yeah, and it depends on what region you're in. There's definitely free resources out there. What I would challenge you to do, though, is you wouldn't look for free resources for ride safety. You would invest in the best. So that's really what we're looking for with accessibility too. Try not, and I'm saying you do, but a lot of places just want to check the box and say we've done some free training, but that's not where you're going to get your ROI. That's not where you're going to get your best customer satisfaction. Is invest in it like you would any other type of training.
I'd just like to say 2 things to that. One, why should accessibility be free? Because it's a very strong business case. We have to pay for health and safety. We have to pay for fire. Why shouldn't we pay for accessibility? But if you want free advice and really strong, inclusive, dynamic workforce, yeah, I've just answered it. Get a diverse workforce. Get people with impaired vision in the team. Get people with a hearing impairment in the team. And we all learn from each other. That's the best free accessibility we can get.
Perfect. Well, guys, I think we have to wrap up as we bring day 1 to a close. So let me finish by saying thank you to Carl, Myron, and Stephen for sharing those insights with us today. And let me close by saying, what a great day here at the first day of the Saudi Entertainment Show. From discussing the Kingdom's prominent role in the global entertainment landscape to delivering dynamic ventures in youth entertainment markets, talking about design, storytelling, and how that's shaping the future of Saudi Arabia. I think we've really begun to open the doors to new possibilities and connections here. I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us and for your energetic participation throughout the day. Let's carry this momentum in tomorrow, where Hind Galadari will be leading the sessions as the moderator, and we'll be looking into topics such as safety, securing the thrills, building the future of live experiences and entertainment, employee retention, and so much more. Join us on day 2 of the Saudi Entertainment Expo. And thank you again to the panel. Please give them a big round of applause.
I would just like to add, do you know how to clap in sign language? Some of you got it right. I want you to copy me, okay?
Congratulations. Thank you so much, guys, for another great session.